New York City. And voters are streaming into polling stations across the 5 boroughs to decide who will run America's largest city for the next term. The race has drawn attention well beyond city limits nationally and even internationally as one of the most watched municipal contests in recent memory. The leading figure in this contest is Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani. He is a three-year-old progressive Democrat who describes himself as a democratic socialist. And he has surged from relative obscurity to become the favourite to win the mayoralty in one of the world's great cities. His campaign platform includes sweeping proposals, freezing rents on rent-stabilised units, introducing free city bus transit, providing public childcare, and raising taxes on high-income earners and large corporations to pay for these services. Meanwhile, his primary rival is former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who resigned the governorship in 2021 amid sexual harassment findings, but is mounting a comeback bid for mayor, this time running as an independent after losing the Democratic primary to Mamdani. Cuomo, once widely seen as a formidable Democratic figure, now faces steep headwinds and accusations that he is out of step with the city's younger, more progressive base. And into the fray enters President Donald J. Trump, who has threatened federal funding cuts if Mamdani wins and has publicly endorsed Cuomo. The involvement of the White House has elevated the local contest into a proxy for national ideological battles. Yesterday, we gathered more than 10,000 New Yorkers as we spoke of a city that is not for sale, Mamdani declared at a rally. A city where New Yorkers could do more than just struggle to afford the most expensive city in the United States. A city government that understood its responsibility to those straining to buy groceries, not just those straining to buy an election. He cast the race in stark terms, not simply who will be mayor, but which vision of New York City and, by extension, America will prevail. Born to immigrant parents and representing a Queens district, he emphasizes the lived experience of many New Yorkers squeezed by housing costs, stagnant wages and transportation burdens. His critics, however, paint a different picture. They label his agenda as utopian and argue that higher taxes on the wealthy will drive business and talent away from the city at the very moment it needs investment. Socialist sounds nice. Utopia, one rival candidate said. Socialism hasn't worked anywhere. Venezuela had socialism, didn't work. Cuba was socialist, didn't work. Socialism is not going to work for New York City. Yet Mamdani's support among young voters appears strong and growing. Officials report that early ballots cast by voters under the age of 35 have surged, in some districts tripling compared with previous cycles. One 7-year-old voter told us, "I'm just going to put it out there. I voted for Zohran. I think he is definitely the best candidate." He explained, people, especially the youth, see this election not just as who's going to lead New York, but who's going to lead the country. In a sense, having someone create such a big platform from a grassroots standpoint. That view of the race as a bellwether for national politics is echoed by analysts. One senior advisor noted that while New York City is unique in its scale and partisan lean, the campaign offers insight into the tensions within the Democratic Party between the traditional centre-left, business-friendly approach and a resurgent left-wing movement demanding bold structural change. On the campaign trail, Mamdani is styled as a new generation of politician. He mixes policy wonkery leaflets outlining his plans for 200,000 new affordable housing units, free buses, rent freezes with Marseille-style rallies, DJ music and a brand new digital mobilization in the city's outer boroughs. At one event, as he greeted supporters in the Bronx, he was greeted with chants of ZM, ZM and high fives down the hall. By contrast, Cuomo's campaign emphasizes experience and pragmatism. His message: the city needs someone who has run government, who knows budgets, and who can secure federal funding and get things done. Not someone who appears to fly by the seat of their policy pants. Cuomo's backers argue that Mamdani's team is small, largely volunteer-based, and lacks the infrastructure to manage the sprawling New York municipal government, one of the largest city bureaucracies in the United States. As one advisor put it, Mamdani is running a team and a staff of 5. How does he handle one of the biggest urban bureaus in the country? On the federal angle, President Trump has staked his claim in the race. He has told New York City voters that if Mamdani wins, federal funds will be at risk. Analysts note that while the president cannot unilaterally cut all federal funding, his administration already targeted major transit infrastructure dollars for the city during his current term, sending a signal that municipal policy can be impacted. One analyst noted there's clearly this idea that targeting liberal cities will support his idea that America's broken cities are the problem and rural America is where the real America is. At campaign events, Mamdani has responded directly to the federal level attacks, saying his vision is one of inclusion and upward mobility, and that his win would send a message of renewal. We're fighting for working New Yorkers, he said. He also made a point of his personal journey, born in Uganda to immigrant parents, raised in Queens, and now seeking to become the first Muslim mayor of New York City if elected. Actually, he would be the first Muslim to serve as mayor of the city. Many see that as a sign of demographic change in the city, yet the challenges he faces are substantial. The municipal budget constraint is real. Paying for free buses, rent freezes, and expanded childcare services will require either major new revenue, deep cuts elsewhere, or shifts in federal or state aid. Business groups worry about capital flight and tax base erosion. Housing developers argue rent freezes send investment signals that may worsen supply. Moreover, Moynihan Plaza in Manhattan, Queensbridge houses in Queens, Brownsville in Brooklyn, these neighborhoods speak to the city's inequality, but they are also home to voters deeply worried about safety, crime, and reliability of transit. That presents a tactical challenge. Can a candidate who emphasizes redistribution also convincingly address the public safety and services concerns of moderate neighborhoods? One voter in South Bronx said she had switched from her usual Democratic vote because she wanted something new. What I've been taking from this election is it almost feels like it's kind of like amplifying the divide. The issues almost seem like the solution almost feels so clear that there should be bipartisan agreement, she said. And I think it's really speaking to the divisive culture that the two parties we have right now are really kind of breaking apart our country. Political scientists caution that while the youth surge is real, history has shown that younger voters are less reliable in steady turnout than older ones. Traditionally, when campaigns focus exclusively on younger voters, that hasn't been a winning strategy, said one researcher. He noted, however, that New York City is strongly Democratic, so much so that whichever Democrat becomes the nominee in November begins with a big structural advantage. He added, that said, the scale of his lead in the primary and the energy behind his campaign is extraordinary. Theory meets pragmatism in a debate on Israel-Palestine and identity politics. Mamdani has spoken in favor of Palestinian rights and called attention to allegations of anti-Semitic violence in New York. He has been criticized for not explicitly acknowledging Israel's status as a Jewish state in an early debate, a point that has triggered concern in some Jewish communities. The Times of Israel noted that in a debate on June 4, he drew fire when he would not recognize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. He responded later, affirming Israel's right to exist, though critics say his language remains selective. His victory in the Democratic primary triggered debate within the National Democratic Party. Some moderate and business-friendly Democrats reacted nervously, warning that Mamdani's style and agenda may alienate swing voter types in other cities or in a future presidential contest. Others celebrated the win as a sign that the party base wants bold change. As one strategist told Politico, for moderates, the reaction is, this is horrible and it's going to ruin us. For progressives, they believe this is what happens when you listen to voters. On primary night, when results rolled in, Mamdani secured about 43.5% of first-choice votes versus Cuomo's 36.4% in early tallies. Eventually, in the ranked choice count, Mamdani prevailed 56% to 44%. Cuomo conceded defeat, though he remains on the general election ballot as an independent. On Election Day, New York City voters will choose among Mamdani, Cuomo independent, incumbent Mayor Eric Adams running independent, and Republican nominee Curtis Sliwa. The fractured field means the winning margin may be far smaller than the primary's double-digit spread. The stakes beyond the next occupant of City Hall. The outcome is widely seen as a test of whether the Democratic Party moves further left in its urban strongholds or whether moderate forces reassert themselves ahead of future statewide and national contests. One political analyst observed, "Is he the future of the party? How much can he actually get done?" The researcher added, however, the Democratic Party in New York is very different to the Democratic Party at large. It would be a much more difficult time convincing the institution that this would be the sort of candidate you'd want to run to try and win over swing voters, for example, in a presidential election. The youth vote, the federal state funding threats, the ideological divide within the party, the generational shift. These are all elements of a much larger story. For the tens of thousands lining up in Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, the Bronx and Staten Island, the decision may be motivated by subways that keep breaking down, rents hitting 5 figures a month, buses overcrowded, and the sense of opportunity slipping away. As one Queens resident put it, I think this is kind of like a first step. I hope for that kind of energy to spread around the country. When the results roll in, New York City will not simply have chosen its next mayor. It will have signalled its political direction for a city, a state, and perhaps a country. The winner's ability to translate bold promises into governance will be closely scrutinised. As one commentary piece noted, electoral wins are meaningful only if they translate into tangible improvements in people's lives. In this election, the entire political world is watching. For Mamdani, it is his moment. For Cuomo, it is his last stand at the top of a political dynasty. For the Democratic Party and beyond, New York may offer a glimpse of what comes next.